Hi, I'm Shivani from Digiologist.com, and in this video, I'm going to be going through everything that you need to know about navigating and understanding your Google Analytics dashboard to be able to get valuable insights and data for your website. So when you first log into Google Analytics, it takes you to the home dashboard by default, and this is what it looks like. It basically gives you a pretty good summary of your website data by giving you a quick look at some important metrics. But we're going to skip over the home customization and real-time tab, and we'll get back to them later because we're first going to start off with the audience tab, which is where the chunk of the data is. So under audience, for the overview tab, it by default shows you a timeline of the number of users for the date range selected above. So right now it's showing us the number of users from July 1st, 2013 to March 29th, 2018 based on a daily basis. So you can look at this timeline in various ways. So you can look at it on an hourly basis, a daily basis, weekly basis, and monthly basis. And for ease of viewing, we'll just set that back to a monthly basis. So below the timeline, we have a bunch of numbers, and these can get a little bit confusing for beginners, but I'm going to go through every single one of these to make things more clear. So the first one that we have is users. Users are basically the number of your site's visitors. And there's a little bit of confusion going on whether users represented in Google Analytics are unique users. The answer to that is yes. The amount of users that Google Analytics shows is unique. So a person visiting your site twice will count as one user only. Now, the reason why Google Analytics doesn't specifically outright say that this is unique users is because sometimes a person may visit through different devices. So for example, a person may visit your website through their laptop, and they might also visit your website through their mobile phone. And that will actually result in two users being counted when it's in reality it's actually only one user. And that's because users are tracked on a per device basis. It is pretty accurate though. Next to users, we have new users, which, as the name suggests, is the first time that a device, so any device, a desktop, laptop, smartphone, etc., or a browser like Chrome or Internet Explorer loads your website content. So users are, like I mentioned before, measured based on a device looking at your site, as well as different browsers. So if a user opens your website through two different browsers, it'll be counted as two different users. Now, most people don't do that, so I do still want to mention that users and new users are still pretty accurate metrics to look at. But we just need to keep in mind that they might be a little bit off. Next to that, we have sessions. And a session is basically a visit to your website by a user and everything that consists of in the visit. All of the different interactions that come from the user with your website, that could mean going through multiple page views, etc. So sessions are actually time-based, which means that when the timeline for a session refreshes, a user that comes back to your site is going to be counted as a different session. So I know that it can get a little bit confusing, so I'm going to explain this with the help of an example. A session is time-based and it's refreshed under two circumstances. Number one is every 30 minutes of inactivity, and number two is 12 a.m., whichever of these comes earlier. So for example, if a user comes to your website and they open up your website, but they leave it open for 30 minutes and they're totally inactive, not even touching that tab, no activity at all. If they reopen your site after 30 minutes, it's counted as two sessions. If someone opens your website today and after 12 a.m. they open your website again tomorrow, it's counted as two sessions. However, if somebody opens your website twice today before 12 a.m., it's counted as one session. So basically, when a user visits your site, it's counted as one session. However, if they visit your site again, either after 30 minutes of inactivity or after 12 a.m., whichever of these two comes earlier, it's counted as a second session from the same user. So basically, a user can come back after some time and have two different visits to your site, resulting in two different sessions if the second time that they visited was either after 30 minutes of inactivity or after 12 a.m. Then the next metric that we have is number of sessions per user. And I also want to quickly mention that you can click on any of these and the timeline above will change. So it makes it a lot more easier to visualize the whole data. So number of sessions per user, as the name suggests, is pretty self-explanatory. It's the total number of sessions divided by the total number of users. Next to that, we have page views. And page views is basically the total pages viewed by all of the users for all of the sessions. Now, I know some of you might still be a little bit confused between users, sessions, and page views. So I'm going to go through one more example, which will take all three of them into account and explain everything in a lot more detail. So let's say that a person opens your website 2 times. Once today, opening 1 page, and once tomorrow, after 12 a.m. has passed, opening 2 pages. All of this counts as 1 user, but 2 sessions and 3 page views. And note that the 12 a.m. that I keep referring to for sessions, for the timeout for the sessions, is based on the time zone that you set in the admin panel over here. After page views, we have pages per session, which again is pretty self-explanatory. It's the total number of pages viewed divided by the total number of sessions that took place. And it's interesting to look at because you want to know how many pages the average session lasts for, which means how many pages a user is looking at when they're visiting your site. Are they just looking at 1 page, or are they looking at 2 pages, 3 pages, what the average number of pages viewed is. Then after that, we have average session duration, which is just the average of how long the sessions lasted. And then finally, we have bounce rate. So bounce rate is the percentage of 1 page only visits. So if a user visits your website and they leave without clicking further, that is, they only open 1 page of your site and they don't click through to any other page, look at 1 page only and leave, it increases the bounce rate. So obviously lower bounce rate is better. But I still believe that there's 2 ways to see this. The good way to look at this is that if a user is only looking at your website, they're opening your site, looking at the 1 page that they're on and then leaving, it could mean that they found what they were looking for. But obviously there's a downside to it as well, which means that they probably maybe didn't find the site good enough to click through to other pages. So there's really 2 ways to look at this, but overall bounce rate is not considered good and a lower bounce rate is desired. Now, before we move on to anything further, I do want to let you know more about how you can navigate this and really use it to your benefit. So like I mentioned, you can click on any one of these and it'll change the timeline up above, or you can click on any of them from the drop down over here. And like I mentioned before, you can change the timeline to view it on an hourly, daily, weekly, monthly basis, and you can change the date timeline above to basically any year, any dates, depending on if you had an active Google Analytics account at that time so that it was tracking all the data. What's interesting here is that you can actually compare it to other date ranges as well. For example, if I set the data to July 1st, 2014 to July 31st, 2014, I can compare it to either the previous period, which would mean the previous month, because this is a full month. So it would mean May 31st to June 30th. Now, it doesn't start from June 1st because July was a 31-day month and June is a 30-day month. So it would start from May 31st to June 30th. So comparing the previous month, or I can compare it to the previous year, which would mean July 1st, 2013 versus July 31st, 2013 to July 31st, 2013. So if I click on apply, you'll see what I'm talking about. So it then compares both of the Julys for 2013 and 2014 and the difference between them. And right now it's showing me everything based on the users. Obviously you can click through to this to whatever you need to. And I can change this to a weekly basis to compare both of the months on a week by week basis. So this is really interesting to see how far your site has come and to compare time periods to each other. Also, a bit off topic, but you'll notice that the date ranges in this tutorial are very old. However, this is a 2018 tutorial and I'm recording it right now in 2018. That's because this Google Analytics account is for one of my really old blogs, which I started around 6 or 7 years ago, which is why all the data that I have is old. However, all of the features that we have are obviously all up to date. This is the 2018 version of Google Analytics. Only the date ranges that I have are old, but that doesn't change anything. Anyways, I'm just going to switch this back to the way it was before. Next to all of these metrics, we have a pie chart, which is pretty simple and straightforward. It basically just compares the percentages of the new visitors to returning visitors. So in the month of July 2014, 8.2% of the visitors were returning visitors and 91.8% visitors were completely new visitors. Below the pie chart, we have demographics. So we can look into the users based on which country they came from and which city they came from, etc. So it's interesting to look at if you have a global business to see where your users are actually coming from and which countries and cities you're popular in. So similarly, we can look at cities as well. And below that, we have even more information. We can look into their browsers, their operating system, service provider, and the same data for mobile as well. This is basically just extra information, and I don't think anyone's going to say, and even though this might not be useful to everyone, I don't think anyone's going to say no to extra information. So it's always good to have this. And knowing about the browser and operating system might be pretty useful to tech companies or to your web designer to look at. So that was it for the overview tab. It's a pretty heavy tab. Under that, we have active users. So a lot of people get confused with active users and they think that they're like real-time users, which means users that are on your site right now. But just to clear that up, that's not what active users are. So real-time users are what you'll see over here, which we'll get into later on. But active users are the number of unique users that initiated sessions on your site for a specific date range. So this is all time-specific data. So basically, it gives us the active users based on 1 day, 7 day, 14 day, etc. The 1 day active users are the number of unique users that initiated the sessions on your site on the last day of your date range chosen above. Similarly, the 7 day active users participated in sessions on your site within the last 7 days of the above date range. 14-day active users participated in sessions on your site, initiated sessions on your site within the last 14 days of the data chosen above. And 28-day active users are the number of users that initiated sessions on your site for the entire days of the date range chosen. Then we have lifetime value. So lifetime value basically gives you the revenue per user in the first 90 days after acquisition. And it's basically the prediction of the value that a user will have over their lifetime with your company or brand. So it really lets you understand how valuable different users are to your business based on their lifetime performance. And lifetime value is actually by default set to acquisition channel as well as acquisition date range. And the reason for that is so you can compare the lifetime value of the users acquired through different methods to see which method is bringing you the highest value users. So you have all the different sources over here that you can compare. Then we have cohort analysis. Cohort analysis basically segments the users based on a date, like the acquisition date or the date they completed their first transaction, etc. And it shows the level that the people are active. So currently it's based on the last 7 days, and you might notice that everything is pretty much 0 at the bottom. That's because I had to change my Google Analytics accounts about a month ago, which is why you won't see any data in this account for like the past 1 month. But that's only really going to affect the cohort analysis section while explaining it. Anyways, it's currently based on the last 7 days as a default. So day 0 over here is the date of acquisition. Day 1 is 1 day after the acquisition, and so on and so forth till day 7 being 7 days after the acquisition. Now, if you hover over each of these cells, some notes are going to pop up along with it, and it actually makes understanding it so much more easier. So 3 days after acquisition date, 4 days after acquisition date, and you can hover over the blue cells as well. And this just makes understanding it so much more easier. So if there was actual data over here and we hovered over, let's suppose this cell, it would have basically given us the percentage of people that were active on day 2 from the set of people that came to the site on day 1. That is, how many people that visited the site on day 1 revisited on day 2, which is basically the user retention. So cohort analysis is basically looking at user retention, seeing how many people are coming back again and again and returning to your site. So this is useful to look into because obviously you want people to return to your site again and again. Then we have audiences, and it basically allows you to better understand who your users are. Now this is a new feature, so there's no data to look into over here. So we're going to skip right through it and go to User Explorer. User Explorer lets you know about the actions and the behavior of each user in great detail. And the users that it's referring to are based on the device that they open your site from. So it's all based on a client ID that Google Analytics assigns the user. and it's assigned to them based on their device. So if some users are opening your site from multiple devices, they'll be listed separately here. So this, for example, is the client ID given to a person that initiated 96 sessions to your site that all lasted 1 second. So this could be a bot. So we can click on the average session duration to make the higher average sessions appear at the top. So this person, for example, initiated 1 session which lasted 19 minutes. And if we click on each of these client IDs, we get even more data. So it shows us which channel they came from, which date they visited, what time they visited, which device platform they came from, things like that. After User Explorer, we have demographics. And this one is pretty self-explanatory. It tells you more about the age ranges of all of your visitors, as well as the genders. And remember that everything in Google Analytics is based on the time range chosen at the top. After that, we have interests. And in interests, we have affinity categories and in-market segments. So affinity categories basically analyze the user's overall interests and passions and lifestyle to get a better sense of their overall identity. And it's all measured by the online patterns that they exhibit, like the type of websites that they visit and their search queries, etc. So it helps in allowing you to know more about your users and their likings. And then we have in-market segments. So in-market segments is composed of users who are actively searching and comparing your product or service. And this can be really interesting data to capitalize on the demands of your users and see what they're into. Then we have geo. So geo just gives us more information about the language that your users are speaking and which location they're coming from. So we can look at language over here and click through to location and see which part of the world they're coming from. Then we have behavior. And the first thing we have in behavior is new versus returning. So this is very similar to the pie chart that we saw under audience in the overviews section of the audience earlier. Basically just talks about the percentage of visitors to your site that are new, which have never visited your site before, versus the amount of users to your site that are returning visitors. So of course, if the percentage of returning visitors is really low, which it is actually in this case, you want to look into why it's so low and how you can improve your website. Now, don't take any of this seriously because this Google Analytics account is actually for one of my old blogs. It wasn't a company analytics account or anything like that. So yes, the number of the percentage of returning visitors is low, but it was a hobby blog, so it doesn't really matter. But if you're a company, obviously this matters, and you want to look into it and you want to improve everything that you possibly can. Then we have frequency and recency. So frequency refers to how often visitors return to your site within a specific time frame, and recency refers to the length of time in days since a specific visitor last came to your site. So for example, in this case, we have over 200,000 sessions, 299,620 sessions that were one-time sessions. Then we have 27,085 sessions that were two-time sessions. Similarly, you can go on through the whole table here, and you can look at the rate of the people coming back to your site. If we click on days since last session, it lets us look at how recently people visit. So most sessions over here are at 0 days, which means that they're first-time sessions from new visitors, which is very common. So 327,043 sessions are first-time sessions from new visitors. And you can actually tell from this data that the numbers aren't lowering at a very significant amount after obviously the first row, but they're not lowering at a very significant amount. In fact, they're actually increasing later on over here, which means that people are revisiting the site even after several weeks, which is a good thing. Then we have engagement. Engagement basically tells us how much time people are spending on your site. And obviously, we want people to spend the most amount of time that they possibly will on our site. So it tells you the number of sessions initiated for these session duration times, and it's giving everything, and it gives everything in seconds. So you might want to convert that to minutes to get a better idea. Then we have user ID coverage. So the user ID coverage is an overview of the distribution of assigned user IDs among all of your traffic. These are the user IDs that we were looking at earlier, which are assigned by Google. And these are the sets of the user IDs that interact with your content while signed in. And we want to look at the signed in users, the assigned users that is, because signed in users are usually engage more deeply with your content, and they're most likely to take more actions that a non-signed in user can't take, like for example, make a purchase. So separating these traffic segments in your reports can help you make better business decisions. Then we have technology. And this again is exactly what we were looking at earlier in the audience overview tab, along with the network. So it just gives you which browser they're visiting from and the network that they're using. Then we have mobile. And mobile is actually really important to look into, because if mobile is your number one traffic source, which it is for most people these days because mobile is huge, you want to make sure that your site looks good on mobile, that your website is mobile friendly, and that all of your graphics and text and everything looks good on mobile so that the visitors can get the best experience possible. Then we have custom variables. So custom variables are the tags that you can insert in your tracking code in order to refine Google Analytics tracking even further. So Google Analytics, you probably already have an idea so far, is extremely detailed, but you can make it even more refined if you want to or if you need to. So with custom variables, you can define additional segments to apply to your visitors other than the ones that are already provided by analytics. But for this to work, you first need to configure a custom dimension or metric through the Google Analytics management interface. So only do this if you really want to or if you really need to, because this is going to be a bit more technical. Then we have user defined. User defined allows the option for website owners to add an additional label to visitors who reach a certain point or complete a certain action on a website, such as maybe visiting a key website page or purchasing something. And it does require a bit of extra coding help from your IT department if you have one. It is a bit of a technical task to define customer user segments, so you only really want to do this if you really need it. Then we have benchmarking, which is pretty straightforward and self-explanatory. Benchmarking allows you to set benchmarks and see how you outperform or underperform them. And you can benchmark for channels or locations, devices, user flow, for any of the metrics here, which are industry vertical, country, and size by daily sessions. So I'm not sure why exactly benchmark isn't working right now. It was actually just working yesterday when I was looking at the data, and there seems to be some issue. But anyways, when it does work, it basically shows you a line of the benchmark based on whatever you've chosen above. So for example, this website is in the fitness and beauty industry. For all of the websites that are in this vertical that use Google Analytics, it takes all of their data and it compares your site to them. And similarly, you can do it based on the country, and you can go really specific and go into province and state as well to compare data, and also based on sessions. So this is just to know where you are, where your site is compared to other sites that are similar to yours. Then we have acquisition. And I personally love looking at the acquisition tab. It's one of the most useful tabs for me. Acquisition basically shows you where your users are coming from. So it shows us all these different acquisition channels over here, like organic search, direct visits, referrals, social, email, etc. And it gives us the amount of users that are coming through each of these different channels. So this is really good to look into which marketing efforts of yours are working, which channels are bringing in the most number of users so you can work on them and even increase them further, and which channels need work. And all this data is displayed nicely in a pie chart above as well. And if we click on any one of these, it gives us even more data. So for example, I clicked on organic search, and it provides us with some keywords that the website is ranking for and bringing in organic users. Similarly, we can click on Treemaps, and Treemaps just represents the traffic from the different channels in a more visual way. So organic was the number one channel, so it's the largest over here. And you can click on any one of these to get more insights. So we've clicked on referrals, I believe. Yep, we clicked on referral. So it's just telling us which websites are referring our sites, or which websites are bringing in the most amount of traffic. So I can also look at this in a list format. So ignore the other search engines, obviously, because it's not exactly like a fixed referral. What I'm looking at over here is which websites are linking to me and people are clicking on that link through to my site. So for example, this website over here is probably linking to me, and that link brought in 507 users. So yeah, referrals is pretty interesting to look at, just to know which of your backlinks are bringing in actual traffic. Then we have source medium. So as the name suggests, it compares the source and the medium and the relationship and synergy while looking at the users reaching your site. So source is where your users are before they reach your site. That is, which place they were at before coming to your site. Like, were they on a search engine, or were they on a social media platform? Medium, on the other hand, looks at how they reached your site. Like, did they reach your site through paid or organic? So for example, if a user clicks through to your site from Google through an AdWords ad result, Google will be the source and paid will be the medium. But if the user enters your site by clicking on an organic result in Google, Google will be the source and organic will be the medium. So it's really interesting to look at these source medium combos to see what's working the best for you. And then we have referrals, which we went through earlier, which just looks into the traffic coming to your site from another site based on a referral from another site, which is basically tracked through links from the other site to yours and click-throughs onto those links. Then we have AdWords. So AdWords allows you to see AdWords data. So if you're running AdWords ads, you definitely want to link AdWords to your Google Analytics so you can see more data like click and cost data and engagement, the engagement from it, etc. So I'm not going to go into detail for the AdWords tab, since this channel is all about organic and I focus mostly on SEO in my videos and not PPC, since this is an SEO training channel. And also because not everyone that has Google Analytics even uses AdWords. But if you have ads set up, you definitely want to link AdWords to Google Analytics so that you can get more data. Then we have Search Console. So I'm not going to go into too much detail for the Search Console section, because I'm going to be doing a very detailed Search Console, Google Search Console tutorial, which is actually going to be my next video. So I'm going to be putting that up around 3 days after I put up this video. And if you're watching this video late, my Search Console tutorial video is probably up. So I'll have the link to that in the description box down below, and you can click on it or you can just check it out on my channel and learn everything that you need to about Google Search Console. So we're going to skip right through to social. Social is pretty self-explanatory. It's the amount of visits that your website is getting from social, and all the data that we're going to see here is very similar to what we saw for social in the acquisition section earlier, except that you do get more detail about the exact pages shared on the social media platforms. And you can see those exact pages if you click on any of these social networks. So let's just click on Pinterest, for example. It then gives you a list of all of the pages on Pinterest, or links rather, on Pinterest that people are clicking through to reach the exact pages on your site. So the network referral section, which we automatically land on if you click on any of the social networks in the overview section. So for example, Facebook, it automatically takes us to network referrals, which basically just lets us go into more depth and shows how many users came from each social network and which ones are the top performing ones and which pages they landed on. Landing pages shows you the pages people are landing on from social networks. And all of this is pretty self-explanatory. You can click on these URLs for more information. Then we have conversions, which is basically all about the conversions from social networks, if you have them set up. And we'll talk about more about conversions shortly, but basically it's something that you'll need to set up in your admin panel. Then we have plugins. So I haven't set up plugins, but this feature can track engagement on your social platforms for your posts, like likes on Facebook, +1s on Google+, retweets on Twitter, etc. I personally like the individual analytics for each of these platforms. Like I specifically like to look at Facebook analytics, Twitter analytics, etc. more because they have more data. But you can link them and look at everything over here as well. Then we have users flow. And this basically shows the path that your visitors take while they're on your site. So it shows which social network the people are coming from, which pages they're landing on, which pages they're clicking through to, and which pages they're mostly dropping off from. Then we have campaigns. And this, similar to the AdWords section, is more useful if you have paid campaigns going on. So more of a PPC thing. Then we also have organic keywords. So I don't really like to use Google Analytics to look at organic keywords because it's not that good at providing data. It really doesn't provide that much data. As you can see, like for most of the users, the keyword is not provided. And that's just how it is for pretty much everyone's Google Analytics account. So I personally like to look at Search Console because it's much better and provides super long lists of all the keywords that you're currently ranking for, which URLs are ranking for that keyword, which position they're ranking at, things like that, the number of impressions they're getting. So for organic keywords, Search Console is the best way to go. And like I mentioned earlier, that is my next tutorial video. And we have cost analysis. The cost analysis report shows the data for the performance of your paid marketing channels. So it compares the cost of each campaign with the revenue, and it basically just looks at return on investment on your paid ad campaigns. And it's more for looking into the performance of AdWords. Again, not using PPC right now. Then we have behavior. And if I click on overview, it just gives you an overview of everything. You can look into to judge the behavior of the users. So like the time that they're spending on your site, the bounce rate, etc. And it actually gives us two new terms that we haven't even come across yet in Google Analytics, which are unique page views and exit rate. Before I even get into unique page views, let's look at what page views are. Let's relook at that. So page views are the total number of times that a piece of content was viewed on your site, the total number of pages that were opened on your site. Unique page views, on the other hand, represent an aggregate of the page views generated by the same user during the same session. That is the number of sessions during which the page was viewed one or more times. So a page view represents each time a user visits a page, and unique page views are calculated on a session basis, meaning if the same user loads a page 5 times in a given session, it's only calculated as one unique page view, which is why the page views are always more than the unique page views. Then we have behavior flow, which is very similar to the flow chart that we saw for social. It's just a flow chart showing the path that your visitors are taking. So which page they're landing on, and their path, and which pages they're exiting from. And then we have site content, and I can click on all pages, and it basically gives me a list of the top pages. So this is something that I really like to look at as well, just to see which pages of mine are getting the most amount of traffic. Then we have content drill down. So content drill down actually shows the activity for all of your pages at the folder level, not just the page level. So if you have like a really proper hierarchy for your site's pages, where you have like various different folders and you have multiple URLs housed in those folders, this is something that you want to look at, as it basically gives you the data for those folders. And by folders over here, I'm not referring to a subdirectory, I'm referring to the parent pages. Then we have landing pages, and I feel like we've gone through landing pages like 2 or 3 times already in this tutorial. Very, very self-explanatory. These are the pages that your visitors are landing on. And then we have exit pages, which are the last pages that the visitors viewed before leaving your site. So you obviously want your site visitors to stay on your site as long as they can. So exit pages are viewed negatively, as they're seen as pages that led the visitor to exit and not click through to another page. So you want to look at which ones were the highest, the pages with the highest rate, with the highest exit rate, and you want to improve them so that your users click through to different pages and not exit. for as long as they possibly can. Then we have site speed. As the name suggests, it just tells you your site's load times, like page load time, redirection time, etc. Then we have page timings, and page timings points out to problematic pages. So these are pages that are, well, they have a higher load time. So these red ones over here. So it could be because of any reason, like maybe there's too many images, or the images are too large, or there's too many media embeds, like video embeds, or the use of Flash or something like that, or it's maybe a redirect. So you want to see which of your pages have the highest load times and look into improving them and decreasing the load speeds. Then we have speed suggestions, which basically just gives us recommendations for improving our page load time. So it pinpoints to specific pages that it does have some suggestions for improving your page speed. So it's come back with a bunch of suggestions now, like optimizing images, reducing the server response time, and some more recommendations here. So this is interesting to look at for all of your problematic pages. After that, we have site search. Now, site search, it basically shows how the search engines on your site is being used. And this is only going to apply to you if you actually even have a search engine on your site. So this isn't referring to your own site search, which results in search results from your own site. This refers to the Google search bar on your site. So it lets you know what users are searching for, and these could be things that they either can't find on your site or they're specifically looking for on your site. Then we have events, and this basically just lets you track your user interactions like downloads, ad clicks, video plays, and more, based on whatever you set in the admin panel. And I'm not even sure how these events got set and which events this is talking to. Like I mentioned before, I've had this Google Analytics account for around 7 years now, and this is really old data that I probably set by mistake, so not sure. But when you do set up your events based on, whatever you want to track, like a download, like an ad click, video plays, etc., you'll get all the information over here, like the pages that the events are taking place on and the flow of the events, which basically just lets you visualize it a bit better. Then we have Publisher, which is all about AdSense. So not everyone uses AdSense, and companies for sure mostly are not using AdSense because, they don't want their site visitors to click through to another site. It really doesn't even make sense. So this isn't applicable to everyone. So I'm going to skip through the AdSense section, and we're going to go straight to conversions. So the first thing we have under conversions are goals. And goals just help you measure how well your site achieves its targets. And it just helps you keep track of conversions that take place. And the conversions that it's going to track are the conversions that you set in the admin panel. And they could be anything. They could be adding a product to their cart, or it could be a download, or it could be viewing a specific page. It could be anything based on whatever your needs are. So I don't have any goals set up as this was just a blog, but for a business, obviously I recommend that you do set up goals, which you can from the admin panel. So then we have e-commerce, and e-commerce is great to look into if you're selling something. Again, this was just a blog, so I don't have any data for e-commerce, but if I did, it would give me some great data like performances of the different products and details of the sales and transactions and the times of purchase, etc. Then we have multi-channel funnels, and multi-channel funnels give you an idea of how your marketing channels work together to generate sales and conversions. So we can look at assisted conversions, which are the number of the sales and conversions that each of the channels in the multi-channel funnels assisted. And we can look at top conversion paths, which once you have the data linked to all of this and all the goals set, you'll be able to see conversion flow paths very similar to the user flow paths that we looked at earlier. And then we have time lag, which is basically just the difference between the first interaction date and the conversion date. So it looks into the time taken for conversions. And we have path length, which displays by percentage and by total amount the depth of each visit to your site. So it looks into how many pages the average visitor to your site viewed before leaving. Then we have Attribution and the Attribution Model Comparison Tool. So Attribution evaluates the effectiveness of your channels, and it traces your visitors' paths to conversions. And the Model Comparison Tool allows you to compare how the different attribution models impacted the valuation of your marketing channels. So we've gone through basically everything over here, the conversions, behavior, acquisition, and audience in great detail. What we have left to go through is the customization and real-time tabs. So we're going to start off with customization and click on dashboard. And we're going to set up our first custom dashboard. So dashboards will let you create a customized dashboard, which could be just a summary of all the data that you want to look at in case you want to just have a quick look sometimes and save yourself some time instead of mining through all this data. So you can just put at your most looked data in your custom dashboard. So to create one, we're going to click on create. We're going to give it a name and we're going to set one up. So to set one up, you're going to use any one of these different ways to represent your data. So I'm going to click on timeline and I'm going to click on users as my metric. So once I add that, it's going to give me my users. It's going to give me a timeline of my users. And of course, this is all going to be based on the date range chosen above. Yeah, and similarly, you can set up your dashboards for anything. You can set up multiple widgets and you can end up creating a dashboard that'll save you a lot of time. Similar to dashboards, we have custom reports. Custom reports, again, save you a significant amount of time. So I'm going to click on new custom report. So let's create a custom report for that will let us look at the users based on the country that they're coming from. So if I click save, it will show me my custom report based on which country users are coming from for the date range above. Saved reports are reports that you can create shortcuts for. So anything over here that you look at in detail, and if you don't want to navigate through these because it can be a lot of clicking through, you can just click on save and it'll show up in your saved reports. Then under customization, the last option that we have is custom alerts. Custom alerts are any type of alert that we want to set up an email for that will alert us whenever something specific happens, whatever we're looking out for. So this is really good for multiple sites when you don't have a lot of time to check. So let's create a custom alert for when our page views drop lower than 400 per month. So I'm going to click on save alert. Anytime that the page views on a monthly basis drop below 400, it'll send me an email once I set my email in here. Then under customization, we have real time. Real time basically displays the number of users currently on your site. This is really useful to look into anytime that you've maybe launched a new feature on your site or you've launched a new site altogether and you want to see how people are reacting to your site. You can always just come here and see people that are on your site at the moment, see where they've come from, if they've come from a social platform, if they've come from organic, which keywords they've come from, which locations they're from, and which pages they're viewing. So right now there's no one on the site at this very moment, but if there was, it would give us insights for all of these. So yeah, that basically sums up the Google Analytics tutorial. I know this was really long, but I really wanted to go into detail for every single one of these tabs. I know it can get really tedious, but I hope this really helped you and it allows you to further analyze your data and get an understanding of the data for your website. If you have any questions, please comment them down below and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. And if you want to take your learning further, you can always check out digiologist.com, where I have an SEO book and course, the links for which will be in the description box down below. So check those out if you want to take your learning further. Thank you for watching and I'll see you in my next one. Hey, this is Shivani and thank you so much for watching this video. I hope it helped you out, and if you have any remaining questions, feel free to leave them down in the comments section below and I will try my best to get back to you as soon as I can. Make sure to subscribe and click the bell icon below to be notified each time I upload so you never miss out on any future videos. Now, if you want to take your learning further, I'm offering an SEO book and course on my website, digiologist.com, and it has the best of what I have to offer when it comes to SEO. So if you enjoy my teaching style and want to take your SEO learning further, you can check out the links to my course and my book in the description box down below. Thank you again for watching, and until the next one, bye for now.